One of our halakhic obligations on Purim Day is to eat a festive meal. According to Harambam, one is obligated to eat meat and drink wine for the Purim meal. And according to Maran, even an onen, one who lost a close relative who has not been buried yet, and therefore is not normally permitted to eat meat or drink wine until after the burial, may eat meat and drink wine in honor of Purim. However, according to Maran, one is not normally permitted to eat a festive meal on a Friday if it's greater than a meal than one would normally eat on a weekday. This prohibition applies to the entire day of Friday, beginning from the morning. And one should not even eat a meal that one would regularly eat on a weekday on a Friday afternoon after the end of the 9th hour of the day, until the Shabbat meal is served. The reason for these restrictions is so that one will have an appetite for the Shabbat meal on Friday night. So what happens when Purim falls on a Friday like it does this year? When should we eat the festive Purim meal? This question is not discussed by Harambam or Maran, but it is discussed by other authorities. We should note that all of the discussion focuses on the timing of the meal. However, all agree that one does still eat meat and drink wine in honor of Purim, even when Purim falls on a Friday. Rabbi Moshe Israelish, a 16th century authority from Poland, who appended notes to Shulchan Aruch, wrote that it's customary to eat a festive meal that one does not normally eat on a weekday in honor of a mitzvah that occurs on a specific day, like a Brit Milah or a Pidyon HaBen, even if it occurs on a Friday. He also wrote that the proper time to eat the Purim meal when Purim falls on a Friday is in the morning. So according to the Ramah, since the Purim meal is a Seudat mitzvah that is eaten on a specific day, it is permissible to eat it on a Friday, but one should schedule the meal in the morning in order not to detract from the honor of the Shabbat meal on Friday night. However, if we go back to the 13th century, we find two well-known authorities that used to start the Purim meal towards the end of the day, even when Purim fell on a Friday. They would recite Kiddush in the middle of the meal and then continue eating in honor of Shabbat. This practice is described in the Gemara as Pores Mapau Mekadesh. You spread a cloth and recite Kiddush. Regarding Pores Mapau Mekadesh, when Purim falls on a Friday, the Meiri, an important 13th century authority from Provence, wrote, "We and our forefathers have the custom, when Purim falls on Friday, to begin the meal while it is still daytime, until Shabbat begins, and then we spread a cloth and recite Kiddush, and then we finish the meal." Similarly, the Magen Abraham, a 17th century authority from Poland, quoted a manuscript from the Mordechai, an important Talmudic authority from Germany in the 13th century, who wrote, "If you are eating the Purim meal on Friday, pray, spread the cloth, and recite Kiddush." This practice was also recorded by Rabbi Yaakov Castro, otherwise known as Mahari Kas, a 16th century authority from Egypt. In his book Arking Joseph, he wrote that when Purim falls on Friday, you eat the meal in the afternoon, you recite Kiddush at sunset, and then eat some more. But some eat the meal in the morning. Everyone follows their custom. Furthermore, Rabbi Raphael Haron ben Shimon, who is the chief rabbi of Cairo from 1891 until 1921, wrote that the custom of Egypt and Jerusalem is to Pores Mapan Mekadesh when Purim falls on Friday. In his book Nehad Mitzrayim, on the customs of Egypt, he wrote that when Purim falls on Friday, the nice and pleasant custom is to eat the meal in the late afternoon after reciting Minha, and in the middle of the meal, cover the bread, recite Kiddush, and then continue the meal in honor of Shabbat. He writes that you er al anisim in Birkat HaMazon, and afterwards you recite Arbit of Shabbat. According to Rabbi Raphael Haron ben Shimon, this is the best way to eat the Purim meal when Purim falls on Friday. So according to some authorities, you should eat the meal in the morning. According to others, you eat in the late afternoon and recite Kiddush in the middle of the meal. What was the custom in Halab? We have one source from Halab that discusses the Purim meal on Friday. Hakam Yaakov Dweck, who was born in Aleppo in the 19th century and passed away in 1919, wrote about the Purim meal in his book She'erit Yaakov. He wrote, "This year, which is Friday, you must have the meal at midday, and the meal must be with meat and wine." So we see that Pores Mapah was not mentioned at all. But instead of stipulating the morning, as we found in other authorities, eating at midday is sufficient to preserve the honor of the Shabbat meal. And he also specified that the meal should still be a meat meal, even though it is a Friday. If one did not eat the meal by midday, they still can and must eat the meal in the afternoon. If you're eating in the afternoon, you should eat in the early afternoon. But if you didn't, you can still eat the meal in the late afternoon without being pores mapao mekadesh, as long as you stop eating and drinking before sunset. If you want to pores mapao mekadesh, you begin the meal in the late afternoon, after reciting minha. You eat meat and drink wine during the first part of the meal in honor of Purim. Bread is not required during the first part of the meal, but if you do eat bread in the beginning of the meal, you do not repeat hamotzi after kiddush. Prior to sunset, you light the candles, cover the bread, and recite kiddush. In kiddush, you omit the blessing of borei pri hagefen, since you already recited hagefen when you drank wine in the beginning of the meal. After kiddush, you must have 2 ounces or at least 1 ounce of bread in honor of Shabbat. After the meal, you recite Birkat Hamazon. If you ate an ounce of bread or more before kiddush, some authorities instruct you to add both Al Hanisim and Retzeh Ha'Halisenu in Birkat Hamazon. But according to Hacham Ovadia Yosef, you only add Retzeh Ha'Halisenu even if you ate bread before kiddush. And after Birkat Hamazon, when you are no longer intoxicated, you pray Arbit of Shabbat. As we said, the custom of Pores Mapah on a Friday Purim was prevalent in Egypt and Jerusalem approximately 100 years ago. It appears that the prevalent custom in Halab at that time was to eat by midday. Similarly, here in Brooklyn, the custom is to eat the meal early when Purim falls on a Friday, but Pores Mapah Mekadesh is a viable option halachically if you are confident that you will follow all of the required details properly.